Two friends, two time zones, and a shared love of stories.
I'm Freya.
And I'm Jamie.
Bridging time zones one chapter at a time.
Welcome to Once Upon a Time Zone.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Once Upon a Time Zone. Today we have an incredibly exciting guest here. Yay. This is Shannon J Spann, the incredible debut author of A Stage Set for Villains. Shannon is based in New York and she is also a social media strategist, loves knitting, wandering her local bookstore, and of course, the theatre. Welcome to the podcast, Shannon.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me.
We're literally so excited for this episode because, a lot of our listeners already know this, but we all read A Stage Set for Villains for our March book club, and so this timing is just absolutely wonderful. We have a lot of our listeners that actually have questions for you directly, so
love that.
Yeah, we're going to get into it. It's going to be a really fun chat. But first of all, before we get into things, tradition on this podcast is that we like to start our episodes with current reads. So we just want to ask you, is there anything you're currently reading or maybe a really good read that you've recently read?
So I'm super late to the hype on it, but I'm reading One Dark Window. And I'm loving it so far. It's so beautiful. I wanted to read it because, first of all, I heard so many good things about it over the last, couple of years since it came out. And secondly, it gets comped to A Stage Set for Villains quite a lot. So, my publisher uses that as a comp and, my readers use that as a comp. And I was like, I need to read this book. Now that I'm reading it, I'm like, I can't believe anyone's comparing my writing to hers. She's, gorgeous. It's beautiful. And I'm loving it so far. I think it's so, gothic, intriguing. It's romantic and kind of mysterious. I really like it. What are you guys reading?
I am actually currently reading Daughters of the Sun and Moon by Lisa C. It's an ARC I got. It's a historical fiction. It's set in 1870, and we follow three women as they move from China to America and just the hardships they go through. So I'm in a little bit of a real world situation right now. But balance. I always switch. I'm like, okay, magical, real world, magical, real world. That's my current read. I'm loving it so far. How about you, Freya?
I've got a really random one. I'm reading To Complete by Ali Hazelwood, her tiny little, I don't even know if it's just a mini book, really. It's 200 pages and it's a tiny little read. And it's a video game romance. It's so out of character for me, but I'm having a fun time.
I love
Ali
that.
is one of my favorite people in the world. She is the sweetest. So actually it's funny you said that. She texted me yesterday because she just finished Stage, and she sent me text after text after text about because she got to the plot twist.
Yeah.
And it made my entire day. She's the sweetest. She's so supportive.
That's so cool.
I love that so much. I love hearing just about the supportive community of authors and just how uplifting it is. It's always so wonderful.
For sure.
All right. So as mentioned, we are going to get into A Stage Set for Villains. But first of all, I just need to ask, because as we were all reading this book, we were all just thinking this seems like such a love letter to acting and theater. And so we just all need to know, what is your background with theater? Let us know. Tell us everything.
Just a hyperfixation, I guess. I don't know. I've loved theater for as long as I can remember. It's always been something I was really fascinated with, and also it was kind of an escape. So I was in shows back in high school. I did a lot of on-stage stuff, but I didn't do professional theater in my adult life. It's not something I pursued professionally. But I loved it so much growing up, and I was constantly listening to musical soundtracks, and obviously I went through a Wicked phase like everyone does. And I loved it. But I also remember every time, whether I was on stage or whether I went to see a show, there was always this feeling of magic that seems to sort of float around theaters. And I was really fascinated by that and the idea that every theater kind of feels a little haunted. And I wanted to take those two things, the haunting and the magic, and kind of come up with an origin story for where those things might come from. And long story short, that kind of led me to where I am now. But yeah, I think there are so many different elements of theater I find fascinating, whether it's the community aspect of that very close sense of bonding that you feel with your cast when you're on stage, or that bittersweet feeling you feel at the end of a show when everyone's kind of taking their final bows and you're saying your goodbyes. And also just thematically, I think theater is a really fascinating thing. I think the history behind theater is really interesting. So there wasn't anything that would keep me from a subject like this. I was kind of like chomping at the bit to do something like this for a while.
No,
That's
we
so
can
cool.
totally tell, like reading through the book and the things you've just said with like how it's so important to have a connection with your cast and your team. Like you can really see that in this book.
Oh,
Like
thank you.
there's I got that like from reading this. So yeah, I love that.
We wanted to ask as well, considering you're a debut author, what has life been like recently? How has it all been, like getting your first book published?
Super busy and super, super fun. I feel like I've had a really, really positive debut experience, and I'm super, super grateful for that. I think you'll hear most authors will tell you like part half of this industry is just luck. Like you kind of have to cross your fingers and hope for the best when you put a debut out there. Sometimes like really amazing books just never even get the spotlight that I think they deserve. I've read so many books that I like wish had seen um, more hype when they came out. So I feel really grateful that Stage did get to find its readers so quickly. And that the reception has been so lovely. I've gotten to do so many cool events. I've gotten to meet a lot of readers. I've gotten to do like in conversation events with authors who I've looked up to for years, which has been just a dream come true. So I think it's been I have nothing bad to say about it. It's just been kind of a magical experience.
That's so, so great. And from what we could tell, obviously you work in digital marketing in publishing, is that right?
I do, yes.
How has that transition been from working there to now being like having your own published book?
It's been like simpler than you would think. Well, simpler and not as simple as you would think. So I'm not published at the same house that I work at. They're very separate for me. So for me, that separation is kind of important. I like doing my writing early in the morning and then I log off and I log on to my 9 to 5. And I love both so much, just in very different ways, because to me, they are very different. I do social media marketing, like you said, digital marketing at my day job. So my day job is like a lot of what I do, similar to like how I do my social media for my own book. So there is some stuff that carries over. I think something that it kind of helped me with is I was very familiar with what the publishing process looked like when I did go to publish. And I think I was also extremely familiar with how much rejection you encounter in the publishing process and in the industry. I wish I could say that, like, yeah, I work in publishing, so I just walked down the hallway with my book and asked someone to publish it, and they said yes. But, I cold queried and I went through a lot of rejections before I found an agent who loved my book. And then we went on sub and it, very wonderfully was picked up quickly once we did. But, I was so used to the roller coaster of publishing by that point because I just knew by, by nature of working in it for so long, there are really high highs and really low lows. And it's no one's fault, but it's just the way the industry is. Like the book industry is very like turbulent. So I think I felt better prepared in that way. And I think the emotional side of publishing is sometimes just as challenging as the physical writing the book. So I
Yeah.
think I was prepared in a way that I wouldn't have been otherwise on an emotional scale.
I love that. Wait, you mentioned you write in the mornings before you log on to work. What time do you wake up? Like when does this happen?
So I don't do like full writing days. Some authors do. Some authors are like clocking into a 9 to 5 and they're writing that entire time. But I
Hmm.
generally will run out of like writing creative juice early. So I get up early, like I will write until like 6 to 8:30. And then I'll switch over for my 9 to 5. And then 5 p.m. onwards, I'll usually switch over to like doing my own social media and stuff because I'm
Hmm.
brain dead by the end of the day. So yeah, I've always been a morning writer.
Wow.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because we've talked to some other authors, and I feel like for the most part, we've gotten a lot of night writers. But
Good
I
for
love
them.
that you're a morning writer. I think like both of us, like we're also morning people, so we can relate to that a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I think
yeah.
it's like by the end of the day, my brain is so filled with the real world, it's hard to go create a fictional one.
Mm,
And if it's in the like early morning, I have not even clocked into the real world by that point. So
Yeah,
it's
that makes so
easier.
much sense. Yeah.
yeah. Literally. Okay, so about a stage set for villains. For anyone of our listeners who hasn't read the book, can you just give a little quick synopsis?
Yeah, so A Stage Set for Villains is a Greek mythology inspired dark fantasy, and it follows this girl who's desperate to break a curse that is like slowly starting to kill her. And so, in order to do so, she infiltrates this deadly magical competition, and it takes place in this traveling theater called the Playhouse. And there she strikes a bargain with its lead player in order to save her life.
Honestly, one of the greatest concepts for a book
Truly.
ever. We also just want to know because we've touched on how you're inspired by theater. We know there's a Greek mythology twist in it, which is really really fun. And also throughout the story, there's this present theme of stories and art and how important and powerful they can be and what can happen when they're restricted or put into the wrong hands. With all of these themes in this book, like what overall, or I guess it probably came from multiple directions, but what inspired you to write the story?
Oh my gosh. I think it would be really hard to like narrow it down to just a single thing. I mean, aside from what I said earlier about having a love for the theater and like kind of being fascinated with this idea that theaters are, carrying this sense of haunting and magic to them, I think the thing that started this book really was the plot twist. And while we're gonna avoid spoilers
Oh,
here, there's a big twist that happens around like the 2/3 mark in the book. And I remember when I got the idea for it, and it's a very theater coded sort of twist. I
yes.
got really fascinated with the idea of like what would that look like to pull off there. I'm sure that there's authors out there who've pulled off similar twists a lot more seamlessly than I did, but when I was writing it, I couldn't find anything that felt similar enough where I was like, yes, there's a blueprint. Someone's done this before. So I felt a little bit lost, and I messed up a lot, and I wrote a lot of really bad versions of it. And I like to think that I cracked it in the end, but I think it was sort of like I got a little bit obsessive about trying to pull that off as best as I could. And then at the end of it all, like that twist, I'm proud of it, but it's not even like in my top, three favorite things about the book. I ended up falling in love with the characters and the
Yeah.
banter and like the relationship that develops there and like all of these other things. And I was really proud of it in the end, but it ended up not being my favorite thing about the book. I discovered all these other things that I loved so much even more. So yeah, it's gone through a journey.
That's so interesting. I feel like that really touches on our next main question that we wanted to ask because I feel like it's a book that has so many little, not just the main plot twist, but there's so many little clues throughout the book that when you're reading it for the first time, it's honestly like quite confusing in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And then like the one that comes to my mind is the alternating like script dialogue and everything like that. Like that was really something that I was trying to figure out the entire time I was reading it. But then obviously as you progress through the story, you get these really great reveals that kind of just leave you like, I was just left staring at the wall and I immediately wanted to reread because I was like, I want to pick
Yeah.
up on these clues.
Thank you.
So I guess what was your process in like, I guess we talked about you like have the whole plot twist, but so you started there and did you like work your way back and then chronologically towards that plot twist? How did you piece all these pieces of the puzzle together?
I knew where I was going when it came to that particular twist, but that was also one of the only elements that I knew was coming. And
Yeah.
so I'm not someone who can jump around writing different scenes and then like go patch them all together. And the thing is, it's because I'm like I can't be I have to be a like eat your vegetables first on the plate kind of person instead of skipping to dessert. And that's what that would be for me. It's like writing the fun scenes first and then writing the other things that I need to do in the background
Mm,
afterwards. I have to start at the beginning and work my way forward because it forces me to want to make every scene my favorite scene instead of jumping around to the things that sound exciting and then maybe not getting to the parts that connect those exciting moments together. And so I knew I was working towards this very specific twist, and I knew I knew how I wanted the finale to look. But how we get there is a bit of a roller coaster. So I remember I was stuck with this book for quite a while, and I knew the idea, and I knew where I wanted, like, I knew what I wanted it to feel like, but I kept getting stuck. And then one day I was listening to this song and this kind of like this dam broke loose in my head. And I saw this very distinct image of these two people who were walking into an arena. And these two people seemed to care about each other like a great deal. And I was really fascinated by that. I was like, how do we get there? Like, that's a wild place to be. And I wanted to capture that feeling that I had. So I was really driven by that. And then as far as the other like little clues and twists and things, it's funny that you brought that up because at one point, very close to when we were going to print, I messaged my editor because I was like, I feel like I put too many clues in. I'm nervous everyone's going to figure it out. And she was like, Shannon, no one's going to figure it out.
No, not at all.
No way.
And I was so paranoid because there are, like, if you go and reread it, you'll find a lot of clues. But I was very nervous about it at the time, and I'm glad that it didn't end up being the case. But yeah, a lot of those smaller twists weirdly unraveled as an organic part of the story and wasn't planned, and was just kind of a happy accident for some of those pieces. And I like to think of it as like the players are just sort of like conniving and plotting and planning on their own, and like it just unraveled in a magical way. But I'm very fortunate that it came together the way that it did. It did go through a lot of editing like any other book does. I'm a very, 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 very harsh and critical editor. I'll throw like 100,000 words out and not think twice about it.
Oh,
But yeah, I'm very brutal. So there's a lot of cut scenes. There's lots of stuff that like my publisher never even saw. There were like a gazillion versions of the first 35 pages of this book. Like it's gone through so many different things. So by the time I had it, by the time my agent had it, and by the time my publisher had it, that was already a very close to final book. So I tend to polish things to death and then as someone else can see them, but I don't tend to bring a lot of eyes in when I'm like in the process of drafting and working.
oh, love that. That's so cool. And I mean, the first 35 pages were so good. It is one of my
Thank you for saying
favorite
that.
moments. No, it's so good. It leaves the perfect amount of mystery, like because you kind of get introduced to it and you get these little kind of crumbs of what's going on. But like after that first chapter, I was like, wait, I have so many questions, and it immediately just like pulled me in. Like it was so good. I loved it so much.
Those opening pages / opening chapters. This is wild, but those went through, I think, 7 different rewrites over the course of 2 weeks. And they went from being 60 pages long to being 35 pages long. So a lot changed and was cut and switched around during that time. And I think it's because, you know, if you're entering a fantasy novel, that's the easiest place to lose a reader. Like you're either going to hook your reader in and bring them into this like world that you're excited to tell them about, or you're going to lose them in like the complicated world building or, you know, whatever it is, like if you don't catch them. And I know for me, like what was really important about this story is I kind of wanted it to feel a little bit like I was like sitting you down and telling you a story, like across a table with a cup of coffee or something. Like I wanted it to feel easy to understand, or like we're on FaceTime together and I'm telling you a story. Like I wanted it to feel like that more than like, let me give you an encyclopedia of the player's lore and all of these things. I wanted it to feel very accessible. And so there were things that I loved, like the history of the players and things I had gone to develop that I ended up cutting because, you know, if they didn't really earn their place, they didn't get to stay.
No, that first bit was so haunting. Like I remember reading a little bit of it, and then my entire day I was just like waiting to get back to be able so I could sit down and read it because I was just like I'm so immediately immersed. So that's incredible.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed those first pages. They came a long way, so it sounds like they landed in the end.
Yes, perfectly.
Definitely did.
We also touched very briefly on your characters, which were incredibly well developed throughout the story. And I specifically would love to talk about the banter between Riven and Jude because that was so well written. It was like the perfect balance of rage and tension against each other, but also like you could see that they had this like natural chemistry and connection and like pull towards each other. What was the most important thing to you when writing the chemistry between these two, or just writing chemistry between two characters in general? Like, how do you achieve that natural pull? Because I feel like it's such a fine line.
I wish I had a better answer for this question. I think the weird thing about it is that was the easiest part of the book to write. Riven and Jude, and I'm sure a lot of authors feel like this, but after a while of writing your characters, they start to feel like you know them, like they're like friends and they're just sort of chattering in your head. And you'll be like in the shower or doing chores or doing something just like boring and random, and you'll hear like a little bit of like someone having a conversation in your head, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and you'll write it down. And most of the banter between Riven and Jude wasn't written while I was like at my laptop writing. It was mostly like I'd be on a walk and I'd hear like a snarky back and forth between the two of them, and I'd be like, oh, that's funny, and I'd write it down, and I'd be like, I have to find a place, to put this. But I think it also is so crucial to their relationship. Their sense of humor is there to balance out the very dark elements in this book. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to avoid spoilers. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Can be hard sometimes.
Going on. There's, Jude is a very morally gray character at times, and then we start to love him at the same time because he's funny and he's charming, and then he does something, you're like, oh, maybe not. Like, but I think it was really there to connect to them and balance them. And I kind of think, like, given that they start on such an uneven playing field, with Jude being obviously in like a much more powerful position and Riven being very weak when she comes to the playhouse, their wit is kind of the thing that balances them out and puts them on a much more even playing field, because Riven isn't exactly one to back down with her words. So I think it was probably my favorite thing about writing the book is the banter side of it. It was very fun.
Oh my gosh,
No, you
I was
can totally
obsessed with
tell.
it.
Yeah.
Jude is like, I was talking to Jamie about this so much. You instantly feel like this connection. You're like, I do not align with like your morals, and you're a very like confusing person, but the charming kind of sense of like wit that he has was so immediately like just, it gripped me, and I was like, I love you. I can't help it.
I wish that every character was as easy to write for me as Jude was. Jude is the only character, and in a lot of ways, I say that Jude is the character who saved this book from going the garbage, because I was very, very close to dumping this book altogether when Jude walked onto the page. And he wouldn't shut up. It was very easy to write. And I was like, oh, interesting. And like some characters, it feels like pushing a boulder up a hill. And Riven is one of those characters. She was very tricky to write. She went through a lot of different edits and variations. Jude did not change first draft to last draft much at all.
Love that.
So most of his lines and stuff are still intact.
How did Riven change throughout the process, now that you mention it?
Riven was a character that she didn't want me inside of her head in any way, shape, or form. And when you have like a character and you're writing in first person POV, like I think the automatic assumption is that the reader is inside that person's head and can hear their thoughts, feel their feelings. Like that's just sort of a given with first person POV. But Riven was a character that every time I would try and write her, it felt like I was being invasive of a character who didn't want me to write her. Like writing out how she was feeling almost felt like too like vulnerable for her character, because Riven is a character who won't even admit to herself how she's feeling a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So she was a character who started out very, very rough around the edges, and like feedback would come back about Riven not being likable enough, etc. Like she's not smiling enough. Jude just killed 16 people, but she's not smiling enough. And it is like something that we see a lot towards female characters, is like we could be kind of hard on them, I think. And Riven is no exception to that. Like we tend to be very hard on female characters and how we view them and the standards that we hold them to. The guys often kind of get a pass. They're like, oh no, he's charming, so he gets a pass. But Riven, I was not willing to just make her likable for the sake of being likable. I wanted to really just get to her heart and get down to where she's not a perfect person and she is a very flawed person. And there have been people who are like, I didn't like the main character because of she was too rough around the edges or she was too angry. And none of like those few complaints I get will ever outweigh the DMs I get from readers who tell me like this character made me feel seen for the first time on the page, and like these things where people connected with her, and I'm like, that's way more important to me than her being liked by everybody. So she changed a lot, but not where it mattered.
No, that makes so much sense. And like knowing Riven and going on this journey with her, seeing your process, I think makes a lot of sense. That tracks. I have a question actually about the magic system and how you built it, because the magic system is essentially acting techniques, and I loved that. But like, how did you sort of build this? Like, how did it start? How did it build? How did it develop? Like, how?
Really organically, to be honest with you. Sometimes people ask me about like, where did you get the idea for this like crazy theatrical magical theater concept? And the magic system is all tied to like real life theater, and it's just an exaggeration of stuff I already love. So the theater like magical system that we have, something I really wanted to showcase there was the idea of actors being very connected on a stage. Like if something goes wrong in the show, you're relying on each other to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And same for like the magic in this book. If, you know, they have this bond, this bridge that ties all of the players together. And if something bad happens to one of them, it kind of impacts all of them. So I really wanted to play with that idea. And I also wanted to play with the idea of like an actor puts on a costume. What if they literally put on like a whole different face and then you get mimicry? And, you know, we have, I think, reality suspension, which I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but like we learned early on that players can essentially like die on stage and resurrect themselves from the dead. I was playing with like the wording of like suspending your disbelief and like reality suspension, and the way like if you're in an audience and you see someone die on stage, you're suspending your disbelief. But like what if that was like a real thing? And then compulsion, this idea of if you're sitting in the audience and an actor's performance really moves you, maybe to tears or maybe to take action based on what you've just seen or whatever it is, you've been influenced. And what if you made that magical and turned it into like, you can't help that the feelings that you're feeling are not actually real, they're based on fiction. I was just really fascinated with all of those different elements. So weirdly, everyone will ask me the question of like, where did you come up with this? And I'm like, I don't think I can write any differently. Like, it's just like the natural like lane for me to go into. And it was just fun. Like, I don't remember it being really hard or really difficult to like list out what I wanted their magic to be. I just remember it being very fun and cool to just explore things that I already loved about this subject.
Oh, I love that. It definitely shines through the page. Something else we need to talk about are mirrors, because mirrors are a very significant element in this book.
Mhm.
I mean, we have our protagonist Riven, who like has not looked at a mirror in, you know, however many years. And we do get the moment when, you know, it happens for the first time. And we also throughout the story start seeing the power of mirrors too. Like mirrors are kind of represented in this kind of powerful way. Where did this idea come from?
I think there's a line somewhere around I think it's in the green room scene with Jude where he brings up all the mirrors in the playhouse and says something to the effect of like, you know, do you know why there are so many mirrors in the playhouse? And it's because theater is in and of itself a reflection. So when the audience comes to see us, we're not there to tell them about us, we're there to tell them about them. So I think thematically, theater acting as a reflection of humanity and our experiences, it felt natural that it would play a really big role in the book as a whole. And sometimes
Hmm.
that's just in a fun aesthetic way, and sometimes it's in a deeper thematic way. But mirrors are, you know, there's something that continued to come up, and we see it in a lot of like old theatrical productions. Phantom the Opera, for example, like mirrors are huge in Phantom the Opera. They
Yeah.
they they've always been, and they're often like viewed as a portal in some magic systems. So they're a portal in this sort of magic system that felt very organic to the story. So I think it felt like something that belonged and something that I wanted to explore a lot, both within the magic system and within the themes.
That makes a lot of sense as well. It's really cool to see like where even like with Phantom of the Opera where these ideas like spur from and stuff. Because when once you say it, you're like, of course, that I would
Yeah.
You're
never
like,
have thought of that.
Okay, and then also at the end of this book, so we kind of talked about the beginning in the first 35 pages and how it leaves you with so many questions. The ending also leaves us with a lot of questions, and I, for one, kind of loved that. Like, again, it felt very theater to just be very kind of like confused at the end, but in the best way, if that makes sense. So I loved the way it ended, but it did leave things kind of maybe a little open ended. So we're just all kind of wondering Is there potential to expand on this world, on this story? What's going on there?
That's a really fun question. So, yes, you're totally correct that it is open-ended on purpose. I really did want to leave space for the reader to decide certain things for themselves. I mean, it's an ongoing thing with the book. The book has a lot of themes that are, rather than messages that I'm telling you, they're questions that I'm asking you. So, like, one of the big questions in the book is, is proper justification all that stands between being a hero and being a villain? And even at the end, that question is never clearly answered. It's kind of up to the reader. And so there are certain elements that are left up to the reader for interpretation on purpose. There are also things that got cut for word count. So there are a couple like questions I wanted to answer that we literally just had to cut because it was too long. So like, for example, the scene where Syl is explaining certain things to Riven and some big reveals happen. 3 pages of that were cut, and it was just because they were questions that are lingering if you think about them and ask them, but they weren't worthy enough of taking up word count. So there are some things that I'll probably reveal, in the future or in another work or whatever, but there are questions that like did have answers that I just didn't get to answer, and that's not my publisher's fault. I was in agreement with them that I wanted to keep the pace moving, so that's why certain things got cut. But there are bits of lore and explanations for certain things that I would have loved to also include in the book if it had been the right move, and it just wasn't the right move. But as far as like whether or not we'll ever see this world again, I think the thing that it's not really a secret, and I've said before, but Theatron is like a little corner of this world, and there's a lot of other places out there within this world, and we know Dionysus is dead, and what does that mean for the other gods, and are the other gods dead as well, and what kind of monsters has resulted from that? So I wouldn't be surprised if we revisited this world. I don't know, I can't promise if that means we'll ever see like Riven and Jude again or where their story goes, but I think it's open-ended enough that it's not like totally out of the question. But what I will say is that A Stage Set for Villains, in and of itself, it was always designed to be contained and, like a one and done. So if I were to ever pick up the story again, it would only be if I felt absolutely certain there was a story I was really passionate to tell. It would never be for the sake of just continuing a story that readers liked. Like I would never take the risk of cheapening the first book for the sake of just trying to push a second book. So if I ever do return to their story, it's going to be because like I have a story I'm really eager to tell with them versus, just wanting to put a sequel out or something.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the best way to do it. So I love that.
I love that. Well, a few follow-up questions that we were just dying to know. What's next for you? I mean, we talked about potentially working in like this world again, but just are you writing at the moment? Is there potentially another book in the works? What's going on?
Yes, so I am starting to write a new book. It is not something I can tell you a whole lot about just yet.
Fine.
And I don't want to get anyone's hopes up like too much in regards of like timeline or what that looks like. People are going to be annoyed with me because I'm a slow writer, and I have so much respect for authors who are able to push like a book out every 6 months. I'm just not one of them. And if you can't tell, Stage Set for Villains has a lot of like intricate little layers that took a lot of time to get the details right on. And I tend to be like, I would rather hold something in a space where like no one has seen it yet until I feel like I've gotten it right, until it's ready to be seen, versus like push it out fast because I feel like people are excited for the next thing and I want to get it to them really fast. So I'll probably take my time a little bit with it, but I am so excited when it is time to share a new book because I love writing. It's my favorite thing in the world, and it makes, it is absolutely mind-blowing to me that I have readers out there who are excited to read the next thing. So I'm very, very grateful, and I'm having fun with the process of drafting again. And by that, I mean drafting is my own personal living hell. I'm an editor. I love editing. I love rewriting, but the drafting part is so hard for me. So I'm in the hard part. I'm looking forward to the easier part.
That's so
Oh
funny.
my gosh, so much respect for that. That's amazing. I can't imagine the drafting process. That's a lot.
No, Freya and I are both always like, we would never write a book. Like, we just couldn't. Like, we're we're not able. So anyone
That's
who
what
can.
everyone says before they write a book.
True.
And then we also had some news I think it was just after Stage 7 Villains came out, that it has been picked up for a film adaptation by Amazon MGM Studios, which is so exciting. So I can imagine this must feel really surreal for you, and this makes so much sense for a film adaptation. Like, this book specifically, I think makes so much sense for me. What has this been like, and how involved are you hoping to be, or will you be? Do you have these dream casts, or it's such an exciting process.
It's very exciting. I always caution people with, like, sometimes film rights get picked up and they don't necessarily immediately move forward. Sometimes things stall for a while, but I am super excited that the film rights got picked up and very hopeful for the future. I'm going to be as involved as they'll let me. And, I would love to see it on screen. As far as casting goes, I honestly don't think I even have a dream cast. People ask me about it a lot, and I would love to see, like, whether it's a well-known, like, actor, or whether it's like an unknown actor. I think I would really love to see someone who just loves and connects with the source material. I think that's really, really important to me, is, if someone whoever they, were to cast as Riven or cast as Jude, like, if they really deeply loved the character, then that's, like, the really important thing to me. Obviously everyone wants to see their thing on screen as faithfully as it can be. Things do change from book to screen sometimes a bit. So I think just the heart and soul of the book making it to screen is, like, the big thing for me. But as far as casting goes, my favorite thing is to actually ask, like, readers, who do you picture? I'm so curious about that. And I've heard so many, like, fun fan casts for the book, and I'm always curious, like, what are yours?
So this is actually really funny because we had our book club discussion yesterday, actually, with our book club, and we actually were kind of, like, bouncing around fan cast ideas with each other. So
I love that.
For Jude, who came up,
Jude
Sam
was
Claflin,
really hot. Yeah,
I think, came up.
Okay.
We also had Thomas Sangster Brody. Is that all the names?
Who is this? I need to look who this is.
He's okay, he was the kid in Love Actually, but then he was also in, like, Queen's Gambit.
What's
Maze
his name?
Runner.
Maze Runner, yeah, Thomas Sangster Brody. Is that his last name? Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I thought that was actually really good. Even, like, not even for, if it's not Jude, even, like, Selenius, I feel like that would fit. Just, like, anywhere in this world, I feel like he would fit real well. We got a lot of Zendaya for Riven.
Zendaya, yeah.
So I once said that she was, like, Riven in my head while
Really?
for, like, a little bit. Like, here's the thing. Riven switches around a lot in my head. I can see her in my head. She doesn't actually look like any specific actress to me, but someone asked me at one point, and Zendaya just kind of, like, came to me. I was like, I can see, like, Zendaya. And I think it's because Zendaya plays dramatic roles so well. And I love that she has the right build for Riven. Like, I think she could pull off being, like, a dramatic, gorgeous, like, player so well. But that said, like, I can see a lot of different actors portraying that really well.
Yeah, I think we're also mentioning too, usually with main protagonists, we find it harder to picture. Like, they're just kind of like a blurry blob in our heads.
I had someone tell me that, like, I'm always like, when I'm reading a book, I'm the protagonist. Someone said this to me the other day, and I was like, good for you. Like, I love that for you.
Love that. And then for some reason, you know what popped into my head? This is so unhinged, but the Corpse Bride. Like,
I mean,
like,
yeah.
more, like, at the beginning of the story, I'm like, you know
the
what?
beginning, yeah.
It fits.
For sure. I had someone else say, these are other people's fan casts, not mine. Jenny Ortega came up a lot.
Yes.
And
yeah, that one came up.
Tom Blythe came up quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
As well as, who is Dove Cameron's fiance? What's his name?
I'm so bad with
Damiano. I think that's his name. I might be saying it wrong, but people send me him a lot for Jude. So yeah, I'm always fascinated to hear like the different fan cast choice. I think it's so fun.
I feel like we could get Corpse Bride in here.
Obviously. Syl is the one who always surprises me because his fan cast range from like Jonathan Bailey comes up a lot.
You know
And it's
what? Yeah,
and it's so funny to me because Syl looks more like Ted Danson in my head. And I'm like, I love that everyone sees him a little different. Sorry, Ted Danson is he plays the guy in The Good Place with the white hair.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like he's older in my head, but like I love that people have like different ways of seeing the characters. I'm never like, no, you have to imagine them like I see them. Like I think it's fun that everyone kind of sees them in their own way.
Oh, I love that.
That's so
Yeah, I
cool. It's kind
guess.
of like coming to life. Like you can see your readers like bringing, like putting their own spin on your characters in a way, like how they imagine them.
They
That's
do
so
all the
cool.
time. I have world's like funniest readers. They're so cool. They send me memes about the book daily. And it's so great. Like they've really turned it into its own thing. And I am so grateful that I have such, like vocal and engaged readers. Especially like they're all over Instagram making funny like edits and not even always funny. Like sometimes they're really beautiful, serious, like aesthetic mood boards and like playlists.
Love
And
it.
it's just really cool to see everyone else take the world and like expand it in their own way. And it's been super cool to see.
Oh, love that so much. Okay, we do have some questions from our book club. So
Sure.
these are questions from some of our listeners. Our first one is from Lisa, and this says, did you always plan to structure the story into acts and parts, or did this idea develop as you wrote the book?
Someone asked me this question yesterday, actually. And it's funny that it gets brought up to me so often because it never even occurred to me that this would be like a unique way to structure the book. It's always been part of the book. So it just felt natural to me that the book would be structured the way a play would. Like you kind of know that going in, you're like, okay, we got theater vibes and then act
Mm-hmm.
one and you've got an overture. The only thing that's like newer to the book was the applause and the
Okay.
intermission having its own section was newer. And there was like a little bit of back and forth on it. They were like, intermission might make readers think that like this is going to be a boring part of the book. And then like crazy things happen as soon as you get to
No, we
intermission.
love we love the
But
intermission.
I held my ground. I was like, no, I'm keeping intermission, because I thought it was so based on what happens when we get to intermission. I thought it was very funny that that's intermission,
Yeah,
for reasons that I won't reveal because of spoilers. But if you read it, you might understand why I think it's funny that
it
intermission
makes
falls where it
sense.
does. But yeah, no, it was always an organic part of the process, and it just never changed.
Okay, this next one is from Molly. And she says, I love how different Riven is from our typical female main protagonists.
Aw.
Did anything in particular inspire you when writing her?
Riven's not a character who ever had any direct inspiration for her. I am a little bit of a like I have like this tragic flaw where I have to like make things feel as original as possible. And I think a lot of writers suffer from it, where you're like, no, this has to be wholly and entirely mine. So to the point where if I start writing something and I feel like I've read it before, it gets scrapped immediately. And
Mm,
I'll like sometimes avoid tropes that even I love because I just feel like they've been used too much or whatever. So, and it doesn't mean I don't have tropes in my book. It just means like I get overly paranoid about it, wanting to feel like something is mine. So Riven has no direct inspiration points, but she was very strongly inspired by music that I was listening to while writing her. And oftentimes, instead of trying to capture like a specific character inspiration, I'll try to capture the feeling that I felt while listening to a song, and I want Riven's character to invoke that feeling. So I would say that was the core inspiration for her, as well as Jude. Jude had like a very specific song as well that I associate with him. And anytime I felt lost about the character, I would like go back and like close my eyes and like re-listen and like focus on how that made me feel, and then I would go back and then work on it again. But yeah, her character has always had like a lot of sharp edges. There are characters that she reminds me of. I don't think that she's like the kind of character that is unlike any other character out there. She reminds me a lot of like Elphaba from Wicked.
oh,
She
yeah.
also like, yeah, like anti-hero kind of vibes where often, a character who's villainized or who you find yourself questioning them and their motives and like, okay, who's right, who's wrong. I think like Jinx from Arcane is another character who always comes to mind. Yeah, she's one of my favorites. And I think the Scarlet Witch, honestly, when I think of like villains who you sympathize with. So there are a couple different characters who I think that she kind of is in the same vein with, but no one who directly inspired her.
Are there any specific songs? Because you mentioned music. Are there any specific songs?
Yeah. So when I was writing Riven, I was listening to a song called The Calling by The Amazing Devil a lot. And when I was writing Jude, I was listening to a song by the same group, but it's called The Old Witch Sleepeth the Good Man Grace. And it's like a crazy 10-minute ballad. And it's absolutely fantastic. But the first like 2.5 minutes of that song are like very like slow, quiet, like kind of you don't think much is going on, and then it takes off, and it follows kind of like the way I imagine Jude's character arc, and then gets really crazy unhinged towards the end. And you're like, what's happening there?
Yeah.
So, versus like the song that inspired Riven has this very like dark and ethereal feeling to it, and also like it's like got a little bit of an edge that feels kind of dangerous, but also it feels very vulnerable and has like this building strength to it. So it's more of those elements versus like lyrical inspiration for me of like what it makes me feel that kind of guides me to find the character. The other thing with Riven was I didn't want her to be like a badass character right off the bat. Like I didn't want her to be like she's secretly an expert swordsman, and also, like, she's leaping across rooftops with no problem. Like, I wanted her to struggle, and I wanted that struggle to feel hard on the page. Like, we see her, honestly, like, she does the main character thing, where she's like, oh, I'll go next, I'll fight the player.
Yeah.
And then she falls on her butt and almost gets killed, and it's because, like, Riven is not meant to be a perfect character, and she does mess up, and she is not the strongest, like, person out there. She's learning, and she's building herself, and I think I wanted her to be a character who makes impulsive decisions and makes a lot of mistakes, but then learns from them. So yeah, there's a reason that she is the insufferable way that she is in a couple of different ways, but I kind of love her for that, because she's got all of these like sharp edges, but inside of all the sharp edges is like kind of a really soft heart, and I wanted to find that balance.
Next question is from Victoria. So, did you have a vision board going into writing this book? If you did, what did it look like?
Like a mood board?
I guess so, yeah.
I think so.
Okay, so what, like when you say vision board, I think of like your manifestation board of like what you're hoping to achieve. Like if you like, I hope I become an author and I hope I get published. And what's funny is we have these two boards in my hallway over here. I live with my sister, and she keeps a vision board like in our hallway, and it's decorated with beautiful Pinterest pictures and stuff. And she put one up for me because she knows I'm such a like manifesty person, and I love those vision board things. But the thing is, I always leave it blank, and to me, it's because I'm leaving every possibility open. So I'm walking by a blank vision board every day. Which
that.
is like very me coded. I'm like, anything could happen. But with like the idea of like having a mood board or an aesthetic board for the book, I definitely was like pinning things to my Pinterest early on. And then I realized I was honestly using that as just a distraction for not doing the actual writing. I'm like, I'll just sit here and pin pretty pictures. And some of the things from my Pinterest board, it's a video that's pinned on my Instagram. With like a lot of those images put together with one of the songs that strongly inspired the book. I've got one of those up. So like there was a board that existed, but it's not something I was constantly referring to or anything like that. It was like, okay, I need to like sit here and not rely on images on the internet. Like I need to come up with all these like images in my head that I'm conveying to the reader, and I need to do the work. So yeah, I love Pinterest, but she's more of a distraction than anything.
Fair enough.
Okay, our last one is from Riven, and they asked, in the acknowledgements, you give thanks to your Heavenly Father. Did your faith influence your writing at all? And if yes, in what ways? Then we have a little add-on. Also, did you face any personal challenges writing this story, and were they helped or hindered by your faith?
Did you say this person's name is Riven?
Revan. So close.
Revan.
Reven. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, very, very similar.
That would have been very fun.
Oh my goodness. Okay, there was a lot to that question. What was the first part?
So the first part was in your acknowledgements, you give thanks to your Heavenly Father. Did your faith influence your writing at all? And if yes, in what ways?
I think my faith influences me in like most ways. So not necessarily just my writing, but also just how I live life. And with writing and with my life, what that means is leading with love anywhere that I can. So, when it comes to my writing, it's honestly a lot of the times, how can I be graceful towards myself? Because I'll be extremely harsh towards myself. And then in my life, like, how can I put something positive into the world instead of something negative into the world? And so I think I'm very thoughtful about, what I'm putting out there when I am writing. And am I, is this a good thing? Does this add in a positive way, or does this add in a negative way? So I think it's a complicated question to like apply specifically to my writing, because I think it's just sort of in general. Like, I think I also would say less so my writing and more so how I went about pursuing my dreams would be where I would apply that. So the way I would apply that is I accepted very early on that like whatever would happen would be the best thing that could happen. So I'm a strong believer in the burnt toast theory. Do you know what the burnt toast theory is?
I'm not
Yes.
familiar.
Okay, so I'm going to explain it really quick. It's this idea that everything happens for a reason, but the specific reason it's called the burnt toast theory is like this idea that, let's say you wake up one morning and you're late for work, and so you need to rush out, but then you burn your toast, and so you're gonna be even more late because you have to make new toast, and then you leave for work, and it seems like a bad thing. But let's say that remaking your toast saved you from getting in a car accident because the time was just like a little different. So it's ultimately a good thing. So I'm a strong believer in that. So when it came to like going out there and querying and like hoping the book got picked up and stuff like that, I never allowed myself to like go into this idea that that a rejection was like a bad thing. I never even viewed a rejection as a bad thing. I mean, obviously I would feel sad about it like anyone else would, but the way I pursued it was I had this spreadsheet with all the agents I had queried, and if somebody said no, instead of like writing rejected and putting their name in red and like they didn't like my book or whatever, I just grayed out their name and I wrote not my agent, because I'm a believer that
Love that.
it's just a door that's locked because there's a different door for me. And whether that door looks like the way I want it to or not, that's what's best for me. So I'm a very like, I kind of walk in my faith in that way of like trusting that like what will be, and not trying to force something. So I would say
That's so
that's
beautiful.
probably one of the bigger ways that influenced my work. And um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can add to that, but that's what's coming to mind right now.
That's really beautiful. I feel like you kind of touched on the second part of the question anyway, on like, did you face any personal challenges and was it helped or hindered by your faith? And I feel like that was kind of touched on with like putting yourself out there to different agents and everything like that.
I think it's a little bit like what I said earlier in this conversation too, where the emotional part of publishing and like pursuing your dreams can be a lot harder than the physical part, because you're going to be shaken by a lot of things. And I think within myself, I had to decide so early on that I wasn't going to be shaken by anything. And that applies to when your book gets published too. So you accept early on, oh, there's no such thing as a book that everyone in the world is going to like. There will be people who don't like what you do and what you write. And I accepted very early on that was a reality. And the way that I practice that is I just don't pay attention if someone feels the need to tell me, well, I didn't like this about your book. Like, I just don't even pay attention to it. And like I said, I lead with love in that. I'm not going to feel angry towards a person. I'm not going to feel bitter towards someone. I'm not going to let jealousy eat away from me when I see someone get something that I really want. I like to view it that like there is jealousy in any creative industry. It's full of artists who really want really big things, but I would rather view that sort of feeling within myself. Like if I see someone get something that I think I want, that's just, that jealousy doesn't need to be something that festers into bitterness or anger. Instead, that's my brain telling me, oh, that's something you want, and that person is proof that it's possible. So turn it into a positive instead of, dwelling on the bitterness of it all. And I think that's something that I worked a little bit into Riven's character is like she does suffer this anger and this bitterness, and she takes it from being a bad thing that eats away at her soul into being something that she uses to protect people she loves, and then a weapon that she lets go of and forgives ultimately. So I think there's a couple different places where I see that reflected in my life and reflected in my work, but I think a lot of it happens subconsciously. But ultimately, I will not be shaken by the things that happen around me, and regardless of how someone speaks to me or treats me or whatever, I'm always going to respond the most loving way that I can, because it's at the end of the day, that's what matters to me and my heart and my life, and what are you putting into the world versus what are you just letting like fester inside of you and change you in a negative way. So it's a very long-winded answer, but I hope some of it
I
made
love
sense.
it. Yeah,
That was
perfect. I love it.
so well put.
Beautiful. Yeah. We're going to finish off this episode by just doing a couple fun rapid fire this or that's. So our first one is plays or musicals.
Musicals.
Yes. We love the music.
Win.
Okay. Tragedies or comedies?
Tragedies.
Ooh, okay. We're against Jude on that one. Break the fourth wall or fail to suspend your reality.
Break the fourth wall.
Okay, yeah, I like it. And our last one, never look in a mirror again or have a constant mirror in your face all day.
Never look in a mirror again.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to us. I know all of us really, really loved your book, and so we've all just been like dying to hear your answers to some of our questions, some explanation to how the process went and how things came to be. I loved this chat, so thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
All right, so everyone, definitely, if you haven't yet, pick up A Stage Set for Villains. Shannon's writing is absolutely beautiful. Loved it so much. Also, if you're looking for a fantasy standalone, great for that. But for everyone here still listening to the end, thanks for listening wherever you are in the world or whatever time zone you're in.
Until next time, stay comfy and keep reading.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on socials for more bookish content.
Bye. See you next week.